So you grew up dancing. You grew up in a dancing household, but at what point for you did you decide, I want this to be a career?
You know, I think one is always searching for that validation, if you will, to say that you have what it takes. And in dance, really, it's always changing. You're always trying to progress. So growing up, I actually didn't know if I could make it, make this my professional career. Tried really hard. I knew that I loved it so much. You know, I would go to school only to go to dance afterwards.
Wow.
That kind of a feeling. But if I really think about it, it was after I won the Prix de Lausanne in Switzerland. I was the only girl from Canada. Nobody had ever heard of Vancouver. And that was a true vote of confidence for me. I was competing with girls my own age from the Royal Ballet School, from, you know, huge Paris opera schools, all the big schools.
It's intimidating.
Yes, and we didn't know anything, really. My dad was there with me. He had seen the Prix de Lausanne on TV, and just thought it would be a great way for me to learn. He actually thought we should just go and watch the competition, not take part, because he really didn't think I'd have a chance.
And when did that thinking change? Like, at what point did you realize, I'm not here just to observe?
I think when I made it to the final round only. Well, when I got there, everybody was so good, and they've been coached so well, and I felt very rushed getting ready. You know, even my costume was delivered to me at the airport because we didn't have anything ready.
Wow.
And going to Europe for the second time, Switzerland for the first time, the stage was raked. I'd never danced on a slanted stage before. I couldn't find my center of balance. You know, everything was so new, but you know, I made some terrific friends. From the Royal Ballet School, the same year I was in Lausanne was Darcy Bussell, who became you know, such a phenomenal ballerina with the Royal Ballet, and is now the current president of the Royal Academy
Wow.
of Dance. So it's wonderful to see our paths, you know, grow.
Incredible. Listen, when you first joined the National, speaking about growing, when you first joined the National Ballet of Canada, you were the youngest member. Do you remember what it was like when you walked in there as this young person, and who did you look to for a role model?
Oh, speaking of which, I come to Toronto and I didn't know a soul, and it was in the middle of winter. And I felt really like a fish out of water. I'd come from Vancouver, from a school that my parents founded, and here I was with the National Ballet of Canada, and even to find a space at the bar, like what, can I stand here? I was offered a contract right away, which was unexpected, and they wanted me to join right away, but I said, I want to finish high school. So I auditioned for them in February and joined them in July, right after high school graduation. We toured 2 weeks after that. Wow. To the Lincoln Center, and really I made my debut with the National Ballet at the Lincoln Center in the full-length ballet Onegin. I was so young, and just everything was so new, and trying to not miss a rehearsal, trying to learn how to read the rehearsals properly, you know, and try to navigate myself and really not show it, you know, not show that this was something so fresh and so new, and everybody was so experienced. Who did I look up to? Well, you know, I think growing up in those days without the internet, very heavily reliant on you know, live performances more, but not many big companies came to Vancouver. And then what's on PBS, what's on TV. So being right there with the National Ballet, I was able to dance next to one of my idols, Karen Kane, and she's been such a dear friend as well, because as my career grew, with the National Ballet of Canada, Karen would be retiring some of her roles, such as Sleeping Beauty or Swan Lake. The real classics, you know, and it would be my first time. And so she would pass on to me so generously, you know, in Rudolf Nureyev's Sleeping Beauty, when I danced with him, he really wanted this, and we'd kind of rehearse together, and those were just unforgettable moments.
You know, people like that in our lives come along, and sometimes they tell us things that stay with us throughout our careers. Or did Karen share anything that either became a mantra or something that you hung on to always?
In fact, yes. I remind myself of those words all the time. It was a little later on in my career when Karen had already made that transition from a principal dancer to be the associate director of the National Ballet of Canada, and I was thinking that I would probably decide to retire in the next year, and I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who I would be. I didn't know what suited me. There were lots of different branches that I could, you know, slip into or take up, but I really didn't know. It was like probably the hardest decision, you know, not to go into the studio every day and perform, giving up those beautiful ballets that I would get to perform on stage, and being someone else on stage and living those characters. So I just remember one day, and this was always weighing heavy on me, and we came across one another in a hallway, and I said, and she just asked me, how's it going? And I said, well, can I ask you a quick question? I said, I'm really not sure. How did you make the transition? How? I'm really nervous, and I'm quite fearful of what's in front of me. And she just patted me on the shoulder, and she said, a few things, but the most important thing was, Chan, you will always be an artist, no matter what you do. And that grounded me so much. And now, you know, whether it's a big business decision, you know, like renovating this new studio space, and, you know, learning about materials, architecture, rezoning, or, you know, dealing with financials and budgets, and all of this, whenever I feel, you know, like I'm out of my comfort zone, I'm constantly reminded with those words that I'm always an artist, and that I have to trust my instincts.
That is great advice. Even when you're doing the non-beautiful things of running a business.
The really factual business things that somehow people tend to think I know something about, and I will learn and probably had never come across before.
Well, let's talk about learning and about firsts. So you were the first principal dancer at the National Ballet that had Chinese heritage. Do you remember what that felt like to be the first? Was that present in your mind? Were you aware of it?
You know, going through the first few years, I really felt like I had blinders on. I knew that I wanted to lead this company someday, and that I wanted to be the ballerina. And so a part of that development was having to go through the corps de ballet and gaining more and more responsibilities, then becoming a soloist, and then becoming a first soloist, and then eventually, you know, becoming the principal dancer. And I hadn't thought much about my racial heritage, or if there was anybody that done this before me. I just really worked hard. I knew that you know, I really had to prove myself. And that's not just for me, but I really knew that if I had that in mind, if I really wanted to lead this, the biggest company, the biggest dance company in Canada, that I would have to be the very best and better than everybody. And so when it was that I got promoted to principal dancer, around the same time the company was celebrating its 40th anniversary. And the archivist came into the studio, and she was talking to a few people, and she came up to me and she goes, Chan, I came across a very interesting fact about you. And I said, what's that? She said, you're the first principal dancer we've ever had of Chinese heritage in the history of the company.
Wow.
And you know, you go along your way and you don't think too much about it, but in retrospect, upon reflection, I mean, it's a huge statement. And I feel very grateful. I feel that I was very grateful to have been given all these opportunities to prove myself, but to really be able to excel.
What does that mean to you now that you have that realization, knowing that you are representation that you didn't have, but you are for thousands of Canadian dancers?
I think it opened up doors. I believe that it changed perception. I believe that for young girls who are going through their ballet training, I'm hoping that it gave them light and hope to say that this is achievable. You know, because I come from a ballet family, maybe I never processed it that way. I just knew that I believed that if I was good enough, that I would make it, you know, and there are so many factors. But my father always told me, you have to be better than everyone else, right? And probably part of that is that ballet is a Western art form. They were new immigrants when coming to Canada, and he's often said, who's going to send their daughter to take ballet from a Chinese person? And he had to turn that around. He had to make sure that he could develop and train and give the dancers, give the students something that they couldn't find elsewhere, and to really produce top-notch results.
Well, and it's interesting to me that although you may not have realized it because your parents were dancers and you could see that representation represented in dance, they probably knew. Having come to Canada, they probably knew that it was a first and what it meant.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. You are now the General and Artistic Director of Goh Ballet Canada. So what was that transition like of going from the beauty and the artistry and the creativity of dance to filing and phoning and paperwork and all of the non-dance things of the stage?
Oh my goodness, I think it wasn't easy. I was put on this wonderful pedestal of being the ballerina, and you know, I showed up at the theater. All I needed to do was take care of myself, which was a lot already, to get ready for a performance, to be at the top of your game. If I was a guest artist with a big company, I would you know, fly in and go into rehearsal the same day and really be able to show everybody that I'm deserving of being invited to this. So I had to look after myself and be responsible for that. But when I gave that up upon retiring from the stage, I had to look after everyone else. I had to make sure that the rosin box was there, that the lighting wasn't too strong. Like, because I'd been a professional all my life, I wanted really to make sure that all of my dancers had all the right things available to them so that they could do their best, you know? And so being very detailed and meticulous about the planning, and also trying to understand what was needed. But it wasn't an easy transition, because I was ready. I was ready to pass this on, but I didn't know of all the different aspects of it, and how, you know, one can't do everything alone, that, you know, whereas dance, I'm dancing. Of course, you're dancing with a partner, you're supported by all the dancers, but you're still, your steps are your steps. Whereas this, you know, it's very dependent on your team, on the people that you're working with, the relationships that you build, and all this, it made me really grow up.
It must have made you really appreciate what your parents were doing back in Vancouver.
Yes, a whole new appreciation, a huge appreciation for the production team all these years. You know, I'd see our stage manager on visits, and I'd be like, thank you for always putting up with me saying, why isn't there a tissue box back here? You know, or to the wardrobe people who, you know, would look after the alterations or fix the dresses, and I'd be like, thank you. I always said, why is this taking so long? And I now have done up costumes for my dancers, and those hooks are not easy to do up, you know, so a huge new appreciation and understanding and a wonderful learning process.
And it's wonderful to still keep learning. I want to ask you about legacy. I know you're far too young to be talking about legacy, but when people hear the name Chan Hon Goh, what do you want them to think about?
That's a question that has been going through my mind, I guess, again, as one is going through this journey of life. I don't think I really think about it too much, but if I have to say, I hope that I leave a legacy of impeccable standard, you know, that I don't settle for second best, that I was able to open up and mentor young girls, young women, and give them the confidence to go into not only dance, but different walks of life, because I feel that what one can take away from the studio are all these amazing life skills, and to feel that confidence, to empower them with the beauty and strength of dance. It takes such determination and guts, and to advocate for the arts. It's often muted and underappreciated, but the power of arts is so essential to the human soul, and I hope I can do more in my lifetime to really get that across, and that's through the best work possible.
I'm glad I'm speaking to you at this stage of your career, because I'm curious to know, now that you've left the stage, you are running a successful business, what are you most proud of?
Gosh, you know, that's, for me as a woman, I have to say I'm very proud of my family life. I'm proud to have an amazing husband who has supported me. We've been married for 28 years
Congratulations.
now. I have a son who's just graduated and going off to university, and through him, through his lens and through his upbringing, I was able to see things differently, and constantly still I'm learning from him and his discoveries and how he's seeing the world very differently, you know. And so I'm very proud of my family life, and I'm proud of what my parents had to, you know, overcome. Now I understand how difficult, how challenging it was for them. It was even more challenging for them in the late 70s. But I think I'm proud to be able to carry forward what my parents have built and continue this true love of dance.
Thank you for our conversation today.
Thank you, it's been a pleasure.